Welcome back to another episode of Root Notes.
It's good to be back.
Yeah.
Good to be back in these chairs and in the same spot.
Yeah.
When we were thinking about ideas for this, we listed out a bunch of ideas. This wasn't one of them. You and I were texting back and forth this weekend, and we started kind of disagreeing about an idea and having some different angles on it. And you were like, hey, wait, let's do this on the podcast. Right. So I thought it was a cool idea. So today we're talking about the idea of constraints. And so I want to start by just asking you, where did this come from? What were you thinking about? What did you experience that led you to go, you know what? I want to think deeply about constraints and what that might have to do with public health or communities or whatever.
Sure. Yeah, man. So, you had been on the road, and we had actually talked a little bit on the road, and you had talked a little bit about the epidemic of isolation. Right, mm-hmm. The loneliness and the isolation that leads to loneliness, and it got me thinking about that. And so constraints were in my brain in two different ways. Right, okay. One is the value of constraints when you are trying to innovate, when you are trying to solve problems. We know that unlimited choice means that a lot of times there's paralysis in terms of decision making, and that constraints can give us the push we need to be more creative and solve problems more quickly and collaborate more. I mean, we know that from the work that we do in communities and with organizations all the time. Constraints are helpful in that way, right?
Yeah, as a technique, we often rely on a sprint, like a design sprint to get to ideas instead of just saying, take as long as you need or something like that, because the time constraint, for instance, helps people think differently.
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Right. So that's a helpful thing.
All right.
At the same time, when we're talking about things that lead to loneliness, like isolation, what are the social structures and sort of the policy elements that have allowed this to sort of become a problem? And it didn't become a problem overnight, right? Like, this is not something that just popped up like an acute problem. This has been developing for years, this sort of epidemic of loneliness and isolation. And I was thinking about it in the sense that constraints help us be creative and solve things, but at the same time, constraints also require us to collaborate, require us to cooperate, and require us to interact in those places and those spaces where we are imposing constraints to solve problems, right? To come up with ideas. But when those constraints are removed, things flounder, they don't move forward, and the same is kind of true socially. So when I think about the constraints that used to be the truth, or the case. I think about things like barn raisings, right? Like, you needed your neighbors to come and help you raise a barn, right?
Yeah. It was the only conceivable
It's the only way to do it. That's exactly right. There wasn't the technology, the machinery to do those things. You relied on your neighbor. It was true when you were doing cooperative farming, right? Like, we relied on our neighbors to help us produce food, to help feed our families and our communities. And then more contemporary examples would be, we used to shop downtown at the same market, right? Yeah. The market square, the downtown, was such a huge part of the community. It's where we interacted. Except now I can literally have that sent to my doorstep from an online retailer like Amazon, maybe even today, right? Like, I don't even have to wait for it anymore. But I didn't interact with anyone. I mean, even our media channels, thinking about like the amount of media we can consume just to get information. I grew up with 3 channels on a television.
You keep saying these things like, I mean, you're old, but you ain't that old.
No, man, we did.
3 channels.
We had 3 channels. Lived in a rural area, a big cabinet TV with the antenna on top of the roof. And we had 3 major networks,
ABC,
3 CBS, NBC. That's it. That's exactly right.
You know you had the CW.
I did not. I did not. No. So, yeah, even there, the constraint of having fewer news sources even meant that at least when I'm communicating and having conversations with other folks in my community that I have to interact with more, at least then, we're talking more or less about the same things from the same sort of perspective, or at least same information source.
Right. You start with, when you have a limited number of news outlets, you started with a fact set that was more easily assumed between parties, like even people that disagree with. Yeah.
Now I'm not making the argument as an aside that those facts were accurate or didn't have a spin to them, but we had a smaller pool of facts to pull from, right?
And shared. I think that's what you're really
right. And that's what I'm talking about, is sort of that shared experience. And so it got me thinking, the more we have removed constraints that required us to interact, that required us to rely on each other, that forced us to make decisions from a more delimited set of things, then those constraints have been removed, and now we are paralyzed by choice, we're overwhelmed, and we're not interacting. And so I think it contributes in many ways to this sense of loneliness and isolation.
Yeah. I mean, and so when you're talking about constraints there, it's a pretty big category of things that you would include. Like, you're talking about the technological advances in machinery that allow us to do more independently, like raise barns without having all of our neighbors join in.
Right.
But you're also talking about, like, being able to shop without having to fit into the 10 to 5 hours of the store downtown.
Yeah.
Okay? So you're talking about, like, the time constraints and the physical constraints and all of that.
And even geographic constraints. We're far more mobile because of the ability to work remotely, right?
Interesting.
Yeah, and so I think all of those things, geographic, spatial, temporal, technological, all of it.
Yeah, I mean, so to be clear, I mean, I think there's science that would back up some of the things that you're saying. And so when you look at social psychology and behavioral economics, there is a literature around the idea that more choices can actually diminish the satisfaction that you have with any given choice.
That's exactly.
It's actually the reason I don't have satellite radio, because for a very short period of my adult life, I had satellite radio in my vehicles. And I never listened to anything because you got 100 other options, and I just can't settle on one thing long enough to enjoy it. So eventually I just realized that having all the choices was not enhancing my life.
That's exactly right. If you think about, if you have the time to sit down and watch something on TV, and it's going to be streaming now, you're clicking through stuff, you're watching a trailer, and 30 minutes later you just go to bed and you didn't watch anything. I mean, have you had that experience?
Or the paralysis with just trying to find something to stream on Netflix.
Yeah, right. That's what I mean.
Yeah. So you have all of these choices. And you know what? It's funny. I remember listening to how old the listeners are out there. It felt like that back in the day, sometimes at Blockbuster.
Oh, yeah.
You'd walk into Blockbuster, it's just like, wow, I don't know, there's too many choices. And now Netflix dwarfs that, Netflix is just one of the apps on your television.
Oh, that's exactly right. Yeah. And so, yes, this overwhelming amount of choice diminishes satisfaction. The literature is very clear on that.
I think, so there, yes. So the human experience of the satisfaction with an individual choice is clear on that. Mm-hmm. But I feel like you're taking that and then you're going, okay, so we should be thinking about that when we're thinking about communities and public policy and social policy. So help me understand what that looks like. Like, if constraints, you're saying, have had some value in the past, still have value in the way in which we enjoy or don't enjoy choices today, that you're saying, I think anybody would agree with you, right, that the advances in technology have been isolating. It's one of the things that's actually talked about in the Surgeon General's report. So I don't think that's up for debate. I think you're right about that. But the question becomes like, okay, so if you say constraints were actually helpful, if that's the thesis, what's the policy that goes from there, or how does our thinking change?
So maybe it's not the policy, but let me ask you this. When we are making policy, do we stop to ask the question, wait a minute, we're trying to solve a constraint. We're trying to undo a constraint because we think it's a problem. What is the benefit to this constraint? And what is going to be that sort of unintended consequence of removing it? And I don't think we ask that question at all. I think we just look at every constraint, every imaginable constraint as a barrier to be removed. And when we do that, it has a consequence, and we don't necessarily stop to think about, is there benefit to this? Is there a reason behind the constraint in the first place? And I'm not arguing that all constraints are good. Don't hear me wrongly about that. I mean, but
right, because that's part of my hesitation. And when you initially text that to me, it was like, hey, I've been thinking about this. This seems like a really, something that we should be considering. And the way you just talked about it makes a lot of sense. Like, if we are removing a constraint, is that to our collective advantage? But here's the challenge for that. I think most of the time these constraints are being removed not by public policy, but by technological advancement in some sort of profit-driven sector. I mean, Amazon wasn't motivated, I don't think, by any sense of like common good, but rather trying to achieve, back in the day, faster book delivery. And so I think as you think about that now, like, these constraints are mostly being lifted by corporations, I think.
Here's an example. When we are thinking about telemedicine, for example, I am all for it. I'm all for increasing access, expanding access, using telemedicine. But as we are thinking about policy as it relates to telemedicine, what are we losing? Is there a good in the constraint of having to have face-to-face personal interaction with a provider?
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
I think we are blowing right by the question because it's our nature, one, to push against the barrier, and so we just sort of ignore it.
Yeah, that's super interesting, and I think is definitely angling towards some really important stuff. I wonder if it's the constraints, though. Part of my thinking about this is the constraints might be the byproduct of other things. And so, for instance, that I've been spending a lot of time working with rethinking some of my courses and my orientation to community health around the leading causes of life.
That's right.
To me, see what you think about this. To me, it's not as if you said not all constraints are good.
You're right.
I would go so far as to say it's probably not that constraints are good, but rather that these other things that you were mentioning had in the whole of it good. Part of it was a constraint that helped you feel better about your choice, but it was a part of a lot of other things. And so what I would submit to you is that when you're saying, hey, look, we had some things going for us when things weren't as easy as they are now, not the least of which was the interdependence that these challenges created.
Right.
I think that's where the policy questions really should be.
Constraints are also things like social norms that we then define corporately, and there's no way to sort of accomplish what you're discussing or what you're describing without, sort of co-defining those social norms, right?
No, I mean, I think that's really important. One of the things that's a real challenge, I think, to our field is that the way in which public health has been medicalized has created the ability to sort of take something that we think works and then create a technique out of it.
Yeah.
Right? And what happens is that we have this analysis that goes, oh my gosh, I'll give you the best example.
Okay.
This just occurred to me. Somebody invited me to a talk, and it was by a physician, mostly to other physicians. But at this talk, this guy who was a scientist, a physician scientist, they had been doing work for decades about how basic diets, meaning not basic as in Karen, but like basic diets in terms of
diets of Chipotle,
but like in terms of acid versus base, that's good for your organs. Okay, so, and I won't get into all the science of that. I promise you, there's science behind this. And so the idea is that some of our default diets end up being acidic, not in terms of necessarily that we're taking in acids, but the way in which it ends up being metabolized creates an acidic bent that's not good for our organs, especially our kidneys. And that's where all this is starting from. So this African-American physician scientist, drawing from this research that he'd done at his bench in a lab, right, begins this project in northern Texas with a bunch of African-American churches, rethinking diet and collaborating with local growers and working with these churches to do things like cooking demonstrations, providing the produce free of charge to the community so that they could begin implementing this dietary change, right? It's this really exciting thing. And that's the reason I mean, it took me about 5 seconds to realize, oh, this is why people invited me here, because I'm all about this kind of stuff, right?
Right.
He gives this whole presentation. I'm like jumping out of my seat. This is beautiful. This is everything. And there are a couple of medical students who, kudos for being there. They raise their hand and they go, well, if the whole issue is about having a more base diet, then couldn't you give them a sodium bicarbonate supplement? Now, for everybody else who speaks English and is normal, that's just baking soda. But it's the reason.
Take some Tums,
right? Right. So, but what cracked me up in this moment in my head is I'm just dumbfounded. Is like the medical model all too often is about playing like, Sherlock Holmes with trying to detect just the little technique that we could do that might arrive at the change in whatever we want.
Right.
Rather than seeing the whole. This guy was describing a whole, and it had as a benefit, a change in diet. That might also equal taking a tab of baking soda and connection and support for the local growers.
Right.
And you see what I'm saying?
I do.
And never mind the other benefits of the dietary change.
Sure.
And they were like, yeah, but could you take sodium bicarbonate? And it just occurred to me in that moment, like, this is
the problem.
The reason that public health has atrophied in some of the skills. Like, we have not been working our community health muscles because our field has been so impacted by this medical model. It's like, what is a simpler technological solution to this challenge? And so I say all of that I think the pragmatic thing about constraints is, even if constraints are beneficial, I don't think they get people excited.
No, they don't. But here's the thing about constraints. I want you to think, at least, why do we play games?
Because they're fun.
They're fun. And why are they fun?
Because they're fun.
No, they're fun. No, they're fun because
they're fun because they're fun, man.
They're fun because there are rules. There are constraints that you have to abide by to accomplish a task, to meet a goal, right?
I mean, I hear what you're saying. Like
we talk
basketball without lines on the court.
Or unlimited fouls, or
we literally played that basketball. By the way.
We may have,
but I hear what you're saying. But nobody's excited by the rules, and that's my point. Like, if you're trying to initiate social change in public policy, I think using your game analogy, people get excited by the game, by the purpose of the game, by what you're trying to accomplish, maybe oftentimes with other people. And that's what I'm saying. Like I think we stand a better chance to even include some constraints in our policy by saying, like raising the flag of connection, coherence. Let's make communities that make more sense to the humans living in them. That's exciting. I don't know if we're people like, what do you like less choices? And part of the reason for that, would you submit to constraints on your life that I get to choose?
Well,
that would be fun.
Well,
we could run this experiment.
I think we do, right? I think
I get to choose.
That we get to choose, right?
The royal we.
Right, the royal we. We are already sort of living under those constraints that we, the royal we, have agreed to, right? The social compact. I think I hear what you're saying. One of the reasons I wanted to bring up constraints, though, is, the truth is, your rebuttal to me in this text thread was about it's innovation. It's the ills of innovation that are the problem. It's not that the constraint, the removal of it was the problem. It's the unintended consequence of the innovation. And the reason that I push back and still think that constraints are worthy of consideration, particularly in policymaking and decision making, is once you innovate, you don't go back. You don't pull back innovation. I mean, can you think of an example where we have innovated out of a constraint and have went, oh, we lost something here that we didn't mean to lose. Let's just back up. It doesn't work that way.
Only in cute ways. And what I mean by that is you'll see some, like, for fun, retro experiences where we very intentionally, but I think this is kind of to your point, that sometimes we do realize that we've lost something. We don't change our lives back, but we recreationally visit the constraints. Do you know what I mean?
Right. And so I don't think innovation will be rolled back, but I do think at least asking the question about when we make decisions at the policy level or even at the adoption level, technology, are we losing something here that has benefited us greatly? And if so,
that is a powerful question.
How do we then adapt this innovation in a way or modify our policy so that we retain more of it? That, at the end of the day, that's what I'm interested in. That's what I care about.
No, and I think that ends up being about raising a vision of, like, is this creating the community that we really want to be a part of? And the truth is, so you and I have spent a lot of time thinking about AI and public health. And one of the pushbacks that I've gotten as we talk about this is you guys are accepting AI without thinking.
No, right.
And
no, I'm thinking.
It's not true. It's just that I am trying to be pragmatic about where we are. And I think that there's real danger in where this AI revolution will leave us as society. And I think that the only option we have that is not catastrophic is for really thoughtful people right now saying, how do we integrate this into the communities that we actually want to live in? Because I don't see a future where we go, put that genie back in the bottle.
Yeah, the genie never goes back.
I mean, to your point, right? So I think it's about, like, okay, how do we envision a community that makes sense for the humans in it? That includes AI, as an example. How do we create a telehealth system that makes sense for the humans involved in it? Because it's not just patients. Like, the productivity of pressures of telehealth can make for a very unsatisfactory, like, work life for the providers that are involved in these systems. We got to ask the questions you're talking about. I just think that the focus ends up being like, do you want to be a part of this community? Let's create that. And not so much asking people, don't you want to surrender your technology?
No, I don't think
But I still think we should run the experiment where I get to decide some of the constraints of your life for a week.
So on SNL Weekend Update, the two co-hosts.
Yeah.
They have this tradition at the end of the season where the other has to read jokes live on air that the other has not heard.
Oh, I'm very aware of this. This is hilarious.
Yeah. So I'm thinking that's what we're talking about doing right here, David. You've done this to me before. I've done it to you. We'll be in the middle of a meeting, a facilitation class. And David was saying, Dr. Rich would like to say a few words about fill in the blank, and we get to play Whose Line Is It Anyway with our career.
I don't
Thanks.
know if you should be talking about this.
All right. No, this is a fun thing to unpack. And again, I think your point is very valid that the ills of innovation really are the issue. I just think there is some value in using the lens of constraints when we're asking these questions. Mm-hmm. That's really where I'm getting at.
How was this constraint actually helpful to our community? Did it help us have coherence? Did it help us have connection?
Yeah, and my fear is that we only have ever recognized that after the fact. Mm-hmm. And so asking the question up front.
It reminds me, there's actually, if people want to do a little scholarly reading, there's a philosopher named Martha Nussbaum, and she really talking about economic systems in countries, and she talks about the capabilities orientation. And it's like, instead of thinking solely about GDP as the measure of whether or not your economy is working, think about the capabilities you are building with the people in your community. And it gets all to agency and freedom and people having control of their lives and their direction. And if you have to measure this is Nussbaum, if you have to measure your economic productivity, quote unquote, based on those ideas, you come up with something really different. And so I think the tree would hold, the same would hold true if we were trying to idealize something like health. Is how do you construct that, but realize that we don't really have a gross domestic health metric.
Maybe we should.
Well, no, but I think what she would say is don't try to reduce it to something like that. You got to instead embrace community and let health be the byproduct of a community that's really working well.
That's pretty cool. That sounds almost like a detour worth taking.
Okay, so speaking of detours we're taking,
yeah,
I've got one.
Okay, what is it?
It has been so entertaining for me. So there is a band called the Hillbilly Thomists, Thomist, as in followers of the thinking of Thomas Aquinas.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you weren't expecting that, right?
No.
Their name comes from a Flannery O'Connor quote. But this is a couple of, maybe more than that, Dominican monks, brothers who are playing banjo, mandolin, guitar. They're playing bluegrass. Kind of think, what was that Coen Brothers movie that we loved back in the day? Like, Oh, Brother, Where Art Thou?
Oh, Brother, Where Art Thou? Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Think Oh, Brother, Where Art Thou if you're familiar with that soundtrack. In that style, but they just have all of these Americana songs. And for me, I think half the fun is just seeing these pictures of these guys in their monk robes.
Right.
Playing banjo. It's awesome. So check out the Hillbilly Thomas.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, I was listening to it as I drove all around rural Michigan. I was like, this is all right.
I never know what you're going to bring, man. I really don't.
That was not on your bingo card.
It was not on the bingo card. Well, this has been fun. Thanks for indulging me in the conversation. Thank you guys for listening and checking us out. And hopefully we'll see you again up the road.